Hello, everyone, and welcome to Women in Leadership Talk. I am super excited. I have Gillian Stein here with us today. Gillian, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, we're thrilled to have you. And we're going to have a great conversation today. And I want to thank all of our audience for being here with us today, and just give you some insight as to who Gillian is. And today's topic is really about mental health. And she's going to be, sharing lots of wonderful information with us. So, please listen in, take notes, and just enjoy this conversation that we're having. So Gillian is actually the CEO of Henry's, which is an iconic Canadian brand, which is family owned and operated since 1909, like been around for quite some time. Yes. It happens to be the country's largest independent camera retailer, and they take care of all digital needs for all these creative, wonderful people across our country. And so we're so super grateful to have you. But Gillian has been CEO since 2015. And since she took over Henry's, she's helped to transform this traditional retailer into an omni-channel specialty business and has overseen a successful restructuring process while navigating the pandemic. And that's not an easy task at all. So congratulations on that. And, in an effort to destigmatize mental health in the business community, Gillian has become the first CEO to actually speak out and publicly announce her own personal mental illness diagnosis, which she did back in 2021. And that takes a lot of courage, Gillian. So thank you for doing that and for all the work that you're doing to create awareness around mental health. I also have to mention that she was named one of the top women in Canada as a Women of Influence in 2022. So another great honor. And again, I appreciate you being here today and being so open and candid about, your own journey with respect to mental health. So I'll welcome you officially now.
Thank you so much, Vicki. I'm blushing. That was
you're blushing.
Very kind.
Well, it's, you and I've had some conversations around, mental health and the stigma around that. And I believe fully that it's an even bigger opportunity since the pandemic, opportunity being awareness and creating awareness so that people become more engaged. And one of the things I've learned from you, just in the conversations we've had, is that this is not a straightforward path. Everybody's different. And so my hopes today is that, you're going to share with everyone, a bit about your own journey and why now? Why are you talking about this now? So I'm going to let you take over for a bit and just share with us some of your journey.
Yeah. So I'll start with my story. So that really started when I was in my first year of university at McGill, and it was the middle of winter. I'm 18 years old and I'm at the airport in Montreal. But I'm completely convinced that I'm standing in the Phoenix airport in Arizona. So now do me a favor, picture Montreal in the middle of winter and then imagine sunny Phoenix, Arizona. I was completely confused. I didn't understand why they wouldn't give me the bus schedule for Phoenix. And all I wanted to know is when the bus would leave for Tucson. It seemed like such an obvious thing. The airport staff were confused as well. And they were looking at me like I was crazy. And it was the most infuriating feeling. I stormed out of the airport. Somehow I did make it back to my dorm room at McGill. But at some point reality set in, but I still didn't understand. I was completely out of control, out of touch with reality, and was unable to do anything about it. It was like my mind had betrayed me. And I didn't know what was going on, but I knew that something was very wrong. So I did what any teenager alone in a new city freaking out would do. I called my mom.
Thank God for moms.
Yeah. Now she could have just told me to get some sleep, say that I was working too hard. She might even assume that I'm exaggerating or just lonely, looking for sympathy or attention. It was my first year of university. It could have been many things, but not my mom. My mom got on the next plane to Montreal. You see, my mom had seen this kind of thing before. So what my mom knew when she got that call from me in 1996 was that my father had bipolar disorder. So let me just step back and explain what bipolar disorder is.
Okay.
Bipolar disorder used to be referred to more commonly as manic depression, and it's really characterized by highs and lows.
Okay.
So now imagine, take the best feeling you've ever had, the most excited you've ever been, the most reckless, the most demanding, and now multiply that by 1,000.
Wow.
That's mania. And it's overwhelming. So it leads you to do things that are reckless and dangerous. You could easily drain your entire bank account in a single day when you're having a manic episode. It can also result in psychosis, where you aren't able to differentiate between what's real and what isn't. So now imagine that at the end of that extreme high, you just crash. You're depressed, you can't get out of bed, you can't go outside, you don't want to socialize or work. And the idea of just sending a text message or an email to simply decline an invitation feels overwhelming. And suicide can feel like a very real option. Now that can last for months.
Wow. That's scary.
And it is. But on top of that, you don't know when a manic episode will hit or when the depression is going to set in.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know how long each period is going to last for. And so this is where, I think a lot of us can tolerate, we can tolerate a lot when we know what's coming, but bipolar is a very unpredictable roller coaster. So, going back to my story, this is where my mom knew and understood that these things can run in families. It's very hereditary. And in fact, both her and my dad had sort of always thought that my dad's father also had bipolar disorder. But back then, nobody sort of understood these things, didn't diagnose them and, treat them. So we don't know, but whatever his diagnosis might have been, he was obviously struggling a lot. Because he died by suicide when he was in his 50s.
Oh, wow.
So, when my mom got that call from me, her mental health radar went off immediately and she flew to Montreal to take me to get help. And now, as you said, I've talked about it's not a straight line. So this is where, I'd love to be able to say at the end of all this that I went to a clinic, I got a diagnosis, I was handed the right medication and all was well. But that's
not reality.
No. They say on average, it takes about 10 years to be diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And so that was my experience exactly. I did, very quickly, I was lucky, was able to kind of get into pharmaceuticals and psychiatry right away, but, it still took, I tried 5 or 6 different medications before I finally found the right combination that worked for me. Spent countless, hours meeting doctors and experts and trying alternative therapies. And I, said this was all at a time when I was like everybody else, just trying to live my life, figure out what I wanted to do, finish school, start a career, maybe date. It was exhausting.
Sure. Yeah.
And I guess the part where I'm lucky is I had support, right? Yeah. So that's the story with support.
Yeah. And that was one of the things you had shared with me is the importance of having that support system. And that comes in lots of different ways and everybody's different as to how they receive that support, right? But that's such an important piece of it in, helping, understanding it, number one, but helping that person to navigate it so that they can be somewhat in reality, I guess, right? Yeah. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah. Well, reality as somebody who doesn't have a bipolar situation, how they're seeing reality. I'm just thinking about how to even say that properly.
I think it's that your perception changes, right? Yeah. And so it's always important to have somebody who's grounded to help kind of, to understand when something maybe isn't quite, your perception isn't quite reality.
Yeah.
And to kind of help you identify those moments when something is obviously a little bit more serious, needs more attention, again, it's fair. Not grounded in reality is a fair way to describe it.
Well, and I only say that because when I think about the example of how you even discovered that you had this is, you're in Montreal where it's freezing cold in the winter, and you're thinking you're in Phoenix, right? Or in Arizona. And so that's a very different reality check. Thankfully, you had your mom who knew what was happening and was able to get to you quickly.
Yeah.
So why now, Gillian? Why is it important to you to I mean, that's very personal. And, you went through 10 years of navigating this to help you somewhat stabilize it, right? And normalize it for you. So why now do you want to talk about this and share this with the world?
So I was at a funeral a few years ago. Somebody that I knew had died by suicide. And yet, even in this day and age, when we think we talk about mental health ad nauseum, this family did not mention why their mother, their wife, their daughter had died. The children were in their late teens, early 20s, just about to launch. And then this. And I was floored that it wasn't mentioned.
Right.
But then it dawned on me. Who have I told? Nobody really. Obviously my immediate family knew. My husband, I told him when we first started, to get serious. I would tell the occasional friend, but I wasn't public about it. And, my family has this history of bipolar disorder, and they've been equally quiet. Always really, really strong supporters of mental health, but not open.
Right.
And so it, became really clear to me that until I spoke up, that the stigma wasn't going to change. Now, it still took me from that moment where I was convinced I needed to do that. It took me about 3 years to build up the courage to actually do it. But I still feel a level of responsibility. So I think that, I have a platform, right? The fact that I can do this, I'm a successful CEO of an iconic brand. And so I can help to bridge the gap, do my part to try and erase the stigma. And I'm choosing to use that platform.
That's
when
awesome.
when I shared my story, though, I did not expect to get, the response that I got. I was absolutely terrified that people wouldn't take me seriously anymore, and the credibility of my decisions was going to be questioned. And I think that probably holds a lot of people back. I guess I just would want to share that it's been actually an incredibly positive experience. I've been, featured in high profile newspapers and magazines and interviewed on top ranking podcasts. And, as you mentioned, it's always still strange to me that I was, named one of the top 25 women of influence. So these are all, great things that have come of it. I've learned a lot about myself, and I have this amazing stream of people who are constantly thanking me and telling me their stories. And a lot of them are high functioning, successful individuals who have been keeping this, these things quiet to themselves for a long time.
Well, and that in itself is a problem, right? Because for many reasons, because if you're keeping that secret, let's say, then how can you let your true brilliance shine?
Yeah.
And it's also, I guess this is how I look at it. You're taking away a gift from the world, because if you just even your comment just now about how many people come up to you and tell you their story, that gives somebody else, that's a gift, right? Yeah. Because then they're able to share more of who they really are, and not this facade of who they want to project to the world. So that takes tremendous courage and resilience. And, I know that wasn't easy for you. So thank you for doing that, because even some of the things we've talked about with respect to, how do we even create the space of a mental
Mhm.
health literacy? So maybe you can talk about some of the things that you've done at Henry's and how you're helping other people to do that.
So, yeah, mental health literacy is sort of something that I've been talking a lot about recently, particularly at work. And I find that um, I don't think we all have the language yet to have the conversation. And so we always, we talk about, if somebody's struggling, speak with them. If you see signs, but I think we need to go a little bit more foundational and a little bit more, foundational to be able to have those conversations to make sure we're all on the same sort of level when we're talking and we understand. So, one of the things that I find is, just, I don't think we think about it this way. But everybody has mental health, right? We always use it as a term to sort of refer to somebody who's struggling, and it's a negative, but we all have mental health, right? Mental well-being is anybody who's human, anybody who has a brain has mental health. And, you can have mental illness and experience positive mental health. So I would say that's a place where I would put myself today. Not always, but today, that I have a mental illness. I'll have it for life. But I have good mental well-being. But you can also not have a mental illness and still experience poor mental health. And I think, you mentioned it, during COVID, how much, not that it wasn't there before, but I think how much we've all sort of really started to understand our own mental well-being. And that, I think it was Adam Grant talked a lot about during COVID, this feeling of languishing, right? Where you're not clinically depressed, but you definitely are not in a good place. And so even just something as simple as that, to be able to understand, the words, how you refer to somebody is also, really important, right? When you refer to somebody, not labeling somebody by their diagnosis, right? I used to say, for example, that I was bipolar. I don't know why. It was the language that I sort of had always heard around me. But like, would you ever say that somebody was diabetes? Like,
Great point. That's a
don't
great
say
point.
that, right? I have bipolar disorder.
Right.
And when you talk to somebody, you're not, you have depression, right? You aren't defined by these things. And I think that's sort of, as we can wrap our heads around the language, it can help us to be able to have those better conversations. And again, just this idea of labeling somebody and defining them by mental illness or by mental health struggle changes the tone, right?
Yeah.
And the ability to then help and support.
100%. And that is such an important message, right? Because, and it's also, I think, even asking you, like, what feels right for you with regards to that conversation, right? Because I think from a society standpoint, there's a number of things you said there that I want to tap into, because even if we think about COVID, right? Like, a big part of what was happening was people weren't connecting either, right? So that support system wasn't in place like it would be if you were going into the office and having water cooler talk. I mean, it can be that simple, right?
Yeah.
Because that's where you find out the things that are happening with an individual. Right? So, but even having that basic foundation so that you can have dialogue, to me, that is such an important aspect. And I know when you and I first talked, I was like, I'm not sure even how to say it myself, right? Like, and so it is very important. And I'll hear my daughter say things because she'll go, she's OCD, right? And she says it. She goes,
she has OCD.
What's that?
She has OCD.
Right. But she says that. She says,
oh, okay.
I'm OCD, right? And she goes, I have a mental, it's a mental health issue, Mom. And I'm like, okay, but you have tendencies, right? Because it's not everything you do.
Right.
But our conversation helped me to have better conversations with her as well. So that was my point. Yeah, which
Good.
is huge. And so maybe what we talk about a little bit is some of the things that Henry's is doing to, create that opportunity for engagement and for conversation, because I think companies want to, like, they want to have dialogue around it, but, and I know you're still working on that, but what are some of the things that you've been doing?
Well, I guess, I mean, the sort of the biggest thing that we've done over the last few years is we've launched the Henry's Foundation. And so that is in support of mental health awareness and destigmatization and support for Canadians everywhere. My sister, Amy Stein, is the executive director of the foundation. And, we chose mental health as the focus because, it's not just that it hits so close to home for us, but, as we've talked about, it's, it hits so close to home for every Canadian, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things that we have that I just love is an initiative called Uncaptured Moments.
Okay.
And we're encouraging everybody to tap into their creativity and share photos that break free of those picture perfect images that we all see on social media. And
Ah,
instead, showing that we all struggle and that it's okay to not be okay. And I think that's, it's okay to not be okay. And I think as leaders, as friends, as everyone, it's important for like all of us to recognize that we all play a role in this. So, it's trying to really embody, being vulnerable, bringing your whole self to work, to life, to create that trust and that credibility and that loyalty. And I think that, sort of ties back into, really strong leadership, right? Is being able to do that. So that's one of our things. I mean, there's also, there's the training that we do, which goes back actually to the not financial literacy, mental health literacy, right? That training that we've got in place. And really making sure that people understand the benefits and employee assistance programs that we have in place. Because that's something that I would say for a lot of businesses, they have great programs in place, but I would say most of your employees have no idea what they offer, how to access them, and they're going underutilized. So I think that's a great place to start.
so those are three awesome ideas. I really love your comment though about the pictures, because that says, pictures say 1,000 words, right? And it really does start to shift the perspective of that perfectionism or that comparison. I mean, I hear that even from clients that I work with all the time, that, oh, well, so-and-so is doing this on social media, and they start comparing themselves to that. And it's like, but that's not real. That's not real life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not, but we surround ourselves by it every day.
Yeah, exactly. So that's awesome. So, and what have you seen as the benefits of being able to, put these things in practice so far, and, just hearing comments from your teams about how they're participating?
Yeah, it's still, it's, I think everybody's finding their own path, right? And what do they connect with, right? Some people really love to have the foundation. It's something, as part of their sort of daily, like their work environment. And they find that it's really great to be able to throw themselves behind it, get really engaged with it, whether that's fundraising or just supporting the foundation through lots of different means, right? So whether that's, they're creative, we've got obviously a lot of creative employees they can support with, marketing and social media and all of those types of things. So sometimes it's just great to have something that people can kind of all rally behind.
Mm-hmm.
We're seeing, we're paying close attention to the utilization rates of the EAP and making sure that increases. So, I heard, I was at an event, sometime over the summer, and there was this woman, another CEO, and she was talking about how she was so upset that she when she was looking at the utilization of the their company's EAP and how high it was. And her sort of comment that, my staff are struggling and they have all these issues. And I was like, but that's amazing that they've reached out for help. I was like, that is actually, something that you should be really proud of. Yeah. So we're watching that to see, and then, just helping people have, I think we're seeing better conversations. And whether that's to try and prevent somebody who's potentially, from getting to the point where they need to go on, say, a stress leave, so that hopefully we can help beforehand, be a little bit more preventative. But I'd also say we're getting better at supporting our employees who are on leaves for mental health reasons, and working to accommodate and bring them back in a way that is that works for them, that works for us. And, it's a, hopefully then a better long-term outcome.
Yeah. Looking for that win-win, right?
Yeah.
So it's supported both ways. Well, and I remember, something that you had said to me is that just because you can't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And so, that I think that goes into play with the EAP, right? Like to that example you just gave, because clearly that CEO, they've created a safe space and people are using the employee assistance program, to help them navigate some of these things. And I think that's a really important thing because, human nature, we communicate with people, we connect with people, and we tend to paint the best positive, most rosy picture instead of saying, hey, I am struggling and I need some help. And so I love what you guys are doing at Henry's to start to break down that stigma, and you're modeling it, like you're talking about your own journey, which is hugely important.
Yeah. I think it's important that people understand that this is coming from a place that's real, right? Yeah. We understand the, obviously everybody is, everybody's different, yes. but we get it. We get it and we want to help.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. And I think, just as we start to wrap up here a little bit, I'd like us to just take a minute because, one of the things that's really important here that I think messaging wise is you have had this journey since you were 18 years old of dealing with bipolar. And yet today you are a very successful CEO running a iconic brand. I mean, you are known all across Canada, and probably even more than Canada, but for this discussion. Yeah. So how or what do you think made you different from somebody else to be able to latch onto that and have that drive instead of giving in and have the drive to go for what you wanted?
Wow. I would go back to the support. I have an incredibly strong support network, and particularly in the role that I have, and we talked about it actually a lot before I did speak publicly about it, is this okay? Is this safe? Are there going to be, is this going to cause problems for, my future career? Is this going to cause, any issues for the business, right? People, the idea of having, a CEO, somebody who has a mental illness run your business, sounds really, really risky. But of course, that's where I would, say that having anybody run a business is
just going to say that.
And business is about managing risk, right? Exactly. So, we talked a lot about leadership style. I'm very collaborative. We have a lot of safeguards in place, governance practices that make sure that there's not sort of one person that's responsible for everything. And it's important, that accountability and being able to lean on each other. And ultimately, I'm lucky in again, that my board is very supportive of it. And we, sort of said collectively, we're okay to do this. But Yeah. Having a strong support network is so important.
Awesome.
So important.
Awesome. I just want to elaborate a little bit on what you shared there, because what you shared was just true, smart leadership. Okay. Regardless, that's just smart business, because you make sure that you have people surrounding you all the time that can, block and tackle, jump in where necessary, have different strengths. And that's just a really smart way to run any kind of organization. So it sounds like you've taken that just up a notch. So well done. Well done.
Thank you. But you're right. It's just, I agree. It's just good business.
Yeah.
Is what it is.
That's awesome. And it's allowing you, to your point, this platform to be able to share so that other people can start to speak up and share their story and share how they've navigated it, right? Because, it's one thing to, have a particular situation, whatever that might be. It could be even a chronic illness. It could be, you brought up diabetes earlier, right? Like it could be something like that, but that doesn't define us. And so it's how to make sure that you continue to have the successes that you're looking for.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I know we have to wrap up here, but what tips would you like to leave, or last thoughts you'd like to leave our audience with?
Well, I'll start with, what we've been talking about today is just speaking about mental health openly, right? Sharing your experiences, sharing your stories, especially if you are in a position of leadership or power where you can, sort of set that tone. I think that's really important. Obviously, if you see somebody who's struggling, talk to them. It's not, it's okay to talk to them. And, there's also a lot of really great resources out there if you're not sure how to have the conversation that you can look up if you want to get a little bit more comfortable with it. And then, again, you've said it a few times, but having a mental illness or struggling with your mental health does not mean that you can't be successful. It doesn't define you. And, we all find ways to overcome. So I want to just make sure that anybody who is struggling has that in the back of their mind, right? That hope that you absolutely can thrive.
Yeah. Yeah. And if I can just add to that, your support system believing in you that you can thrive and not handicapping you because of, what they classify as a label. I think that's a super important message, because that support system really does need to help you thrive. Awesome. Yeah. Wow. This has been such a great conversation. Thank you so much for taking time and sharing, just your journey and some of the things that you've gone through. And, I'm incredibly honored to have had the conversation with you today and to know you now. That to me, that's huge, because not just as the CEO, but this really speaks to your character and what drives you from a value perspective. So thank you, Gillian, really for coming on and being vulnerable and resilient and sharing with us.
Thank you for letting me share my story with more people.
Awesome. Awesome. And I want to thank our audience who's joined in today to listen. And if you have someone in your life who maybe is struggling and needs that support system, I think Gillian's given you some really great ideas of how you can better or best support them and help them to thrive as they're navigating this journey. And there's lots of resources that you can tap into. And please do check out Henry's, check out their foundation. They're making, definitely a mark in the Canadian marketplace. And, there's lots of ways to get involved and volunteer and support in that respect as well. So, we appreciate you sharing that. And we look forward to we look forward to seeing who our next podcast guest will be. And so please tune in and have a listen. WIL Talk has been nominated as one of the top 30 women in leadership podcasts across North America. And so we're humbled and honored to be recognized and getting women's stories out and sharing things that hopefully make a difference and impact our lives. So thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll see you next time. time. Take care.